All right. Welcome, everybody, to ITSAN's monthly webinar. I am Molly Evans, and I am a member of the board of directors with ITSAN, and I am excited to be hosting our monthly get-together. Tonight, I have a guest that I think we're all going to thoroughly enjoy. I just want to go over a few things before we get into the meat of our webinar tonight. First of all, remember that itsan.org is our website, so if you need any more information or you're seeking more information about topical steroid withdrawals or topical steroid addiction, that is the website to go to. I want to give a quick disclosure just to remind everyone that the interview content and ideas that are those of the participants and by no means are meant to diagnose, treat, or suggest a treatment or regimen for listeners. The guests are brought to bring resources, education, and support for our ITSAN viewers, but do not necessarily represent the voice of ITSAN as an organization. So, all right, we are clear with that. And I'm going to jump right in tonight because we have a very compassionate, and I just can't say it, we have a real dermatologist with us tonight. And for everybody at ITSAN, that's huge. That is like groundbreaking, and just it is such a treat for us to have our guest with us tonight. So Dr. Peter Lio is very generous in giving us his time tonight. He's had a very busy day working, and yet he has agreed to be with us tonight, and I think he's excited about being with us. So welcome, Dr. Lio. We're very happy to have you here. If you haven't read his introduction, his bio yet, I'm just going to give you a little brief bio. Peter Lio is a clinical assistant professor of dermatology and pediatrics at Northwestern University Feinberg School of Medicine. He received his medical degree from Harvard Medical School, completed his internship in pediatrics at Boston Children's Hospital, and his dermatology training at Harvard, where he served as chief resident in dermatology. He received formal training in acupuncture while in Boston. Dr. Lio is the founding director of the Chicago Integrative Eczema Center and currently serves as a board member and scientific advisory committee member for the National Eczema Association for the NEA. So, like I said, we are in for a very big treat. So, Dr. Lio, we're going to get right into some of the questions that I have here, and just a reminder to viewers that if you have questions throughout the webinar, you can go ahead and type those into the chat, and we will address as many of them as we can. We get 1 hour of Dr. Lio's time, so we're going to use it as well as we can. So please feel free to send the questions in, and if there's something that we can't get to, we will try to get that answer for you at another time if possible. So, you are validating and honoring us, Dr. Lio, so much for every one of us that has been on this steroid withdrawal journey. I am over 5 years into my withdrawals from topical steroids, and to have a dermatologist with your background and your credentials here with ITSAN is just, it's like there's not much more you could do to honor who we are and what we're going through in this process. Can you tell us, how were you introduced to the diagnosis of topical steroid withdrawals, if that's what you call it, and how long have you been working with patients that are going through this condition?
Yeah, I feel like I've been probably working with patients for maybe 4 or 5 years now. And I first heard about it from a patient. A patient came in and she had actually found ITSAN and kind of told me about it. And at first it was really tough to get much good information about it. There really wasn't a lot out there. And unfortunately, I'm sad to report there still isn't a lot of great information out there for doctors to learn about. And we started talking about it. I started seeing more patients who had it and trying to learn more about it myself and connecting with other providers who take care of patients with topical steroid withdrawal. And then working with Julie Block from National Eczema Association, because I said, I think we really need to address this. We need to start figuring this out so we can not only help the people that have it, but also prevent it. Because I do think no matter how big it is, there's a lot of debate about this, whether it's really small or if it's, super epidemic. But to me, it doesn't matter. It's a pretty terrible condition. So even if it's a small group, we have to prevent it. We have to do everything we can to learn about it and prevent it. And we want to do whatever we can to help the people that are suffering right now. So then we put together that paper a few years ago. Eric Simpson and Julie's on there as well, and a number of other people. We kind of did a literature review, and it's modest, but that's what we could get published at that point. I will tell you from firsthand experience, it is hard to get papers published on this, again, because science tends to build on itself, which sounds great until you're trying to do something new, in which case everybody sort of doesn't want to hear about it because they say, well, what are you basing this on? What evidence do you have? And it's really hard to study this properly because it's difficult. There's a lot of different presentations of it, and each person goes through a journey, as you guys know. So depending on where you catch them, it can look a little bit different and can have different features.
Will you kind of, because we do, I think we all feel us, you know, we refer to ourselves a lot as the warriors going through this, because we're kind of out in a battlefield with this diagnosis, with this issue, and there's not information. So it really is so hard to find out. But what I'm so curious to know is when the first patient came to you, and this is a condition that is not known across the board, and many of us have a really hard time getting dermatologists to hear what we're saying with this. What made you ponder or think that maybe the steroids were part of the issue? And do you believe that, or what do you think is around this addiction to the steroid or this withdrawal?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's probably complicated. I think eczema is complicated. You know, that's my main area of interest. And even that is really, really complex. And I actually really believe that there are multiple diseases within that. We call it atopic dermatitis or eczema, but it's probably not one disease. So it's sticky and complex, and sort of we're learning more about it as we go. And I think the same applies for TSW. It's probably not one thing. If we looked at everybody who's even just part of ITSAN, we probably could pull apart different groups. So first of all, there's no doubt that some part of it is 100% real and 100% related to the topical steroids. I don't think anybody would argue with that. And if they do, they're just being silly. I mean, there's plenty of data that people can really develop terrible addiction and a bad withdrawal period, like a rebound type flare-up, a rosacea type flare-up. I think many clinicians, if you push them, have seen something like this. So that's, I think, real. Where it gets harder and harder is when we have people who are suffering for years afterwards, sometimes far longer than they've actually used topical corticosteroids, or people that have barely used them. I have a few families who they've only used like a very mild steroid for a few treatments, sometimes just a couple, and they say, no, I think this has broken everything. Now we think we have TSW. And it's really tough because honestly, I don't know. I say, gosh, you know, this does not fit my conception of it. This seems a little bit extreme. You know, where do we draw that line? Because again, my goal, I'm not trying to be right. I would love to figure all this out, of course, but I want people to get better. The hardest part for me is people that are really suffering, that are struggling, not sleeping well, missing work. I have a lot of people who are on disability because their skin is so bad. You guys, you know, people are just open wounds, getting infected, really uncomfortable, not just itch, but pain, right? So this is a really bad thing. And sometimes the sort of prevailing winds have been to not do anything. It's like, let's just forget it. You know, medicine has sort of been in a way contaminated, and I feel bad about that. So I want to do something for these patients, even if I don't exactly know the right thing. I wish we could do something. So that being said, I think there's probably a spectrum. Some people seem to get better really quickly. I have some people that clearly have TSW, but within a few months, they're great and they're fine. They're back to normal. And that's in a way kind of easy. And I put on their chart, we are never putting any kind of steroid on them again. They are not to use any steroids because I think they're at high risk. And there are probably some patients that have gone back and used them again and gotten much worse. But I do have other patients where they've been off for years and they still have TSW-like appearance. For those patients, I really think that it's a part of the same spectrum, but different. I think in some ways the steroids have now broken their immune system or played some role in breaking their immune system. So the reason I think this important distinction is that they're not going to necessarily get better over time. Or they may not. Obviously, I don't know. I can't, we don't know everybody over time, but I have people once you've hit, I really feel like once you're past 6 months or a year, you still may get better. Of course, there are people who get better years out, but I feel like it's a really important time to take stock again and say, well, maybe this is more of a permanent or semi-permanent condition, and we need to do something more than just wait. And I feel that way even people out for 1 week. I want to do something, be it doxycycline, be it light therapy, be it for the more severe patients, even dupilumab, the biologic agent. I want to cool that inflammation. But if they're not suffering too much, I think it's fine to wait. That's totally reasonable. It's just when we get past a certain point, I feel like, golly, we should probably do something to treat this immune system, which is going crazy. Obviously not steroids.
Well, and I think, that approach is hopeful in the sense that a lot of us, I know my own experience is dermatologists that have just responded with, there's nothing we can do for you besides steroids or besides treat itch with other medications, things like that. So validating, but just give, if somebody is to go to a dermatologist who says, you made a comment, you said, you know, some I know have TSW, versus some you don't know. How do you know when that is the diagnosis? Is that what you call the diagnosis?
I do call it that, although it's interesting, there's no billing code for that. So I use a code, I forget the actual number offhand, but I search for it on my medical record system, and it's adverse reaction to topical steroids, or actually it's adverse reaction to corticosteroids. It's even broader, which is great, because some of the patients have TSW from shots. You know, they've had intramuscular injections or prednisone, which is, I think, even worse. I mean, that's even worse than the topical steroids. People are getting that. So I put that on there. That's my marker, so I know they have TSW. And if they, for example, had a local effect, then I'd call it more specifically. You know, I might put, if they had stretch marks in an area, I'd call it stretch marks. But TSW I reserve for that. So I've kind of given it that code in my books. That's how I can study my patients with it or review what I'm learning about it. And I call it that way. So I'll tell you, and this is a good illustration of how difficult the fight is. I just submitted a paper a few weeks ago about my experience and sort of a hypothesis about it. And I'll give you guys a preview if you're interested in what we're talking about. And it was just stone cold rejected from a journal. And for all the reasons that you hear about, they were like, well, you know, this is very provocative, some really interesting stuff, but we just don't feel like there's any data here. Like, you can't just make these claims about it. How do you know? How are you defining it? And I want to write back and feel like, you guys, we can't define it because no one will publish any of these primary papers. If you'd maybe let this go, call it an editorial, call it something, but we have to get the vocabulary out there. And there's no easy way to do it. So I'm frustrated with it right now, trying to make change. So I'm probably going to publish it in more of a magazine format. And that's the way we'll get the word out. And then eventually we'll get the dialogue going, and eventually someone will be able to write, you know, little by little more and more about it. But what I look for is, and what we talk about in this paper, and it is more of an editorial paper, we're talking about this pattern. I'm looking for a pattern of use and response. So what I like to see for my patients is that they will have a flare up, right? So when they come in, they're often either flaring constantly, they're really bad, or they're having spikes. You know, it's like, I'm really miserable, then I'm a little better, then really miserable. What I'm looking for is when we treat with topical steroids, which I still use, you know, because they are incredibly inexpensive for a lot of patients, and really effective for most patients when we use them correctly. But the caveat is, I tell everybody that they cannot use them for more than 2 weeks out of a month, that they have to have close follow-up. I never give 11 refills in a 1-pound jar and say, see you next time. You know, we really have to follow up. And what I'm looking for is this pattern. So what I hope and expect is that instead of that spiky pattern or continuous severe pattern, that they will start to get less and less and less. So fewer flare-ups, less needing to use steroids, farther in between those flare-ups. If we see that happening, people are on a weaning pattern with the absolute value of no more than 2 weeks out of a month to a given area with a steroid. If they can do that, we're on the right path. I'm like, great, you're weaning yourself off, you're going the right direction. Then we're going to, of course, try to use non-steroidals as much as we can from as early as we can. I mean, I try to give everybody a non-steroidal from the get-go and use the steroid more of a rescue type thing to cool things down. If they're going that way, I feel like the chance of developing topical steroid addiction and then withdrawal secondarily is approaching zero. I feel really good about those patients. But if we're seeing either no response, right, they're still doing badly, or to me, the signature of TSW, or really TSA, addiction first, before you get TSW, is increasing need. Hey, you know, it worked a little, but now I need something stronger. And then I'm spiking up even worse when you let go. So instead of this curve going down, the curve is going up. Then I say, okay, we gotta hit the brakes. We absolutely have to stop. You need to get off steroids completely immediately. And I truly think that if we catch this early enough, we'll prevent the whole bad TSW process. And what I'll usually do at that point is say, you're done. You know, I'm not going any stronger. That's it. You're needing too much. You're using too much. We're stopping you cold turkey. And instead, we're going to do something different. Maybe phototherapy. Maybe we're going to do, sometimes for my really severe patients who are suffering, cyclosporin. You know, and I know people have used that very successfully in TSW, and I've used it somewhat successfully in TSW. It's another immunosuppressant, which I don't love, but it can give really good relief, and it's kind of neat because it is by definition a steroid-sparing agent. So we'll do things like that. If we haven't crossed all of our T's and dotted all of our I's, like done allergy testing, you know, to make sure we're not missing a trigger. If there's a dietary issue, we'll kind of think holistically again too. So I really like to try to hit the reset button and go back to the beginning if we're not doing well. That being said, fortunately, it's a very small percentage of my patients that have that funny pattern where I start to detect it. And to the best of my knowledge, and obviously, I'm sure there's probably some angry patients somewhere where that would disagree with me, but to the best of my knowledge, I have not seen it caused in one of my own patients. So I've never really sort of done it to my knowledge. I'm sure I probably have done it, but that I think, and I'd like to think is from good teaching from my teachers to be careful and be aware of this. And I feel like I'm kind of cultivating that and really refining that. So we're extra careful about watching for that. That being said, I've inherited lots of patients who are, I think, on the brink or starting to go that pattern, or, you know, I'm the referral and they're expecting to get stronger stuff. And that's where I'll call it. So I've lived in that moment many times beyond just seeing the poor patients who are already suffering with TSW and have been warriors for sometimes years.
Well, and you know, when you said you look for this pattern of rising or falling to see what you determine, there are certain things that I think so many of us have experienced that is different than what our eczema was, like the red sleeves, you know, the oozing, the sleeplessness, the zingers of the skin. So it's as if TSA or TSW has its own set of symptoms. Would you say that you see a pattern in how, because we all seem to flare at different times. Like I was what they call a late burn. So I didn't really kick in to the full flare until I was about 6 months in. But the first 2 days into it, my face was ballooned up like a tomato. But as far as the sleeves and some of those other things, they didn't come until much later. So what is going on with the body? And do you see that is there starting to become a set of conditions that you can say, this is TSW, this is TSW, this is...
Yeah, I mean, I'm really interested in the language you guys have really independently developed, you know, from elephant wrinkles to sleeve sign to, you know, all these pieces. I think it's fascinating. It is difficult to know if it is really specific for TSW, although I do think they're very commonly seen in TSW. It's just the question is when we see that more in just plain old eczema, some usually very severe eczema, by the way, these are, you know, markers of severe eczema. Are they? Or is it really all TSW? Have I been just calling it severe eczema? But these are patients who are really suffering from TSW. And that's the kind of what I call a nosological crisis. We are stuck with trying to figure out, because essentially all the patients with that eczema are on tons of steroids, often, you know, totally inappropriate treatments of steroids and oral steroids. So are we actually seeing this subgroup, this shadow group that is basically all TSW within that? Or is there just lots of overlap between severe atopic derm and topical steroid withdrawal? And the problem is our current health system is going to make it almost impossible to study this, because we get screamed at. If you don't give somebody a topical steroid as first line, you're basically malpracticing. It's like, well, why didn't you do steroid first? Insurance companies won't cover anything until you fail the steroid. So to make a change, a cultural change, to be able to take patients from the beginning and say, well, we're just going to skip steroids in you altogether, is going to be really hard. It's my dream. I think steroids are a bit of a deal with the devil. I mean, I use them. I'm a pusher. So I have patients who don't love me for being a pusher of them. I use them, but it is truly because that is our best tool in so many situations. But I long for the day when we don't have to use them. And I'm excited that there is now a pipeline of drugs coming, many topicals that are going to potentially be able to work in a totally different way, much more specific, and not have any of the side effects. Because I do think TSW has a lot to do with the blood vessel effect. And we know steroids, one of their most powerful side effects. In fact, the way you tell a steroid strength, right, is that thing called the Stoughton scale. And you put some of the steroid on the arm of a person, a volunteer, and you see how much vasoconstriction there is. The more vasoconstriction there is, the higher the potency. And I think that that is a big part of what's going on. Those blood vessels get broken, and which is why you flush and blush and swell. And I think the red sleeve sign is largely vascular. Although interesting, Belinda Sherry biopsied a patient, Dr. Sherry in Australia, who's amazing. And she is truly fighting so hard to learn more about it. And I've been kind of with her in parts of the journey and trying to support her, because I want more evidence. And she's actually trying to collect primary data. She's amazing. She did a biopsy of one patient that she published about, and it really did look like eczema under the microscope as well. So this is this hard part, this sort of chicken and egg. Which comes first? How much are they related? Hopefully we're going to get smarter. We're going to have new genetic markers. We're going to have new ability to study it. And I'm hoping to enlist Emma Gutman, who's an amazing MD, PhD scientist, researcher, dermatologist at Mount Sinai in New York, who's doing these great papers about eczema phenotypes. So if we could even get the word out as, hey, this is a different phenotype. These patients are fundamentally different, and their presentation pattern is TSW, but their fundamental underlying issue is different in these following ways, and it's similar in these other ways. This could help, again, shape the way we think about the disease, and most importantly, how we think about treatment and getting people aware of this. That's my other dream, if we can figure it out. Well,
we're dreaming with you. Would it be reasonable hypothesis, or do you believe that because we have not seemed to found among our community a linear healing process? There is not a progressive, I mean, I would go from 2 years in looking completely normal again to a month later, full flare. Do you believe we're mixing a withdrawal? Like, does the addiction withdrawal part run out and then I'm dealing with a broken immune system or other issues or blood vessels that have just been permanently damaged? Like, because that's the confusing part. We're used to the idea of healing is progressive and then you're done. So why do you hypothesize that our skin can go through so many various changes where the ooze is gone completely and then out of nowhere? You know, I think we're all chasing diet, environment, humidity. You know, we're trying to put something to make this make sense. And I know eczema, I mean, right. I had it since I was a 2-year-old, so I know eczema is the same struggle. But what would you say? I mean, why is there no linear process to this? And is it always that we're still doing topical steroid withdrawal? Or is there a point where you say the steroids are not in your body, but what?
Right. That's exactly how I think of it in my mind. And again, I could be wrong. So please, I don't want to anger anyone. This is my just hypothesis and trying my best to figure it out. But I really do think that if your TSW is going on beyond 3 to 6 months after you've used any steroids, and you know you're being careful, because we've had a couple patients who actually were still using steroids and didn't realize it, be it through asthma inhalers, be it through, I had a patient using a Chinese product that actually had clobetasol in it. We were like, oh my gosh. So long as you're being good about it, I think 3 to 6 months out, you should be over any true withdrawal in the way that we understand withdrawal. You know, your body has been used to a substance, now you're over it. So I think for those patients, by and large, they now have a dysfunctional immune system. Their immune system and possibly, you know, vasogenic stuff too, vascular and neuro systems are damaged in a way that may be more permanent, semi-permanent. It might not be forever. And I would never say that, because again, I have people who have actually done great, you know, number of years out, or we do some treatments and they're awesome. You know, hopefully we're getting more and more people's life back. So please don't interpret that as you're never going to be better and never going to be healthy. But it may be a situation where, like some of the other chronic conditions we see in dermatology, you know, just taking a break from thinking about eczema and TSW, you know, our psoriasis patients, they kind of have it for most of their life. Now, when they get much older, they tend to get better, and they'll go through huge phases where it can be really quiet. I have patients where I see them in their 30s and they're great. And then in their 40s, it's bad again for a little, and then they're better again. So there may be some larger curves of waxing and waning for eczema, or this dysfunctional version of eczema, this TSW eczema type thing, where it gets better over time or worse over time. But I do think that if you've gone past a few months, it may be more than just a withdrawal piece. I still think it's reasonably helpful to call it TSW, or like maybe, I'm trying to think of other ways to call it, but like a steroid unresponsive eczema, or almost like a steroid exacerbated eczema, where you've now pushed the immune system in a funny place. So it's still interesting designation, but it may be different than just like, you just got to give it more time for it to get better.
Can I ask you, have you ever met anybody that you determined TSW that was healed in 3 to 6 months?
Oh yes, absolutely. And those are some of my patients that it really has been fantastic. Where I can tell you a couple stories. I think the stories help illustrate it. I had a woman in her 50s that had her primary underlying diagnosis was probably rosacea, from what I can understand. And a non-dermatologist saw the redness on her face and gave her clobetasol. And she used this, and it did great. You know, rosacea responds to steroids beautifully. It completely healed up. It looked awesome. But as soon as she stopped, it came back with a vengeance. Well, she did this on and off for a few months, and then everything went crazy. Very classical TSW. Beet red, just unbelievable bright fire engine red, swollen face, super burning sensation. She'd had trouble sleeping, terrible. It actually migrated down to her neck and upper chest, places she had never even put the clobetasol before. And she was absolutely miserable. When I met her, I thought, oh my gosh, this is terrible. This is real classical TSW. And interestingly, so in the background of rosacea, she was not a rosacea form type, because, you know, we see some people that get a rosacea from a steroid, but I think that's a little bit different. This was very classical TSW, oozing, weeping. She'd wet the sheets and she'd put gauze on her face because it was so bad. cold turkey steroids. I put her on doxycycline, in part because I wanted to kill any staph, but in part because it's anti-inflammatory. And also I figured if there was underlying rosacea, which was what I suspected started the whole process, that would help with that too. We did cool compresses to the face. I did calamine lotion. And then I also had her do topical ivermectin, one of the new rosacea creams, real gentle. It's anti-parasite, but it's also a little bit anti-inflammatory. And she did this with cool compress and everything for about 3 weeks and was basically brand new. It was miserable for the first week especially, but by the second week better. Third week she came back to see me. We were talking by phone each week, and she looked amazing. I tapered her off everything. And now she does have a little bit of rosacea left over, I think, with the problem that started this. And the only thing we use is that topical ivermectin cream, and she uses it as needed. She's like, you know what, I don't really want to be on any medicine all the time. If it gets bad, I'll do it for a few days here and there, but otherwise I'm medicine free. And she's a great example of true TSW, what I would call true TSW in the classical sense, who got complete and total clearance. And I mean, there's a note in her chart. I tell her to basically tell any doctor she is allergic, because they're not going to understand you. So I want you to just say you have a steroid allergy and you're not to use it in any form, because I'm worried even if she had like a pulmonary inhaler or something, that could trigger this again. I feel like she is particularly sensitive to have this again. Is that a good illustration of the kind of story where it would get better? Another one, I had a little kid come in, and again, some of my colleagues will say this doesn't happen to kids, but I disagree. I definitely think it can happen to children. But I had a little kid come in who was 5 years old, pretty bad atopic dermatitis, it sounds like. Again, I'm meeting him in a funny place. You know, they've already been treated with steroids, and they have that funny escalating pattern. So somebody started them on hydrocortisone. It didn't help that much, so they cranked it up to fluticasone. It helped a little bit, but they were needing it all the time. Someone gave them fluocinamide, a class 2, and they're using a lot. And when I saw him, he had red sleeves, he had beet red face, that kind of vascular looking, just really bad everywhere. And I said, you know, I'm like, we have to stop immediately. Like, we cannot do this. And the mom wanted something stronger. So like, they said, you'd give us something stronger. I'm like, no. We're going to just stop, hit the brakes. And that was a patient we did phototherapy for. About as young as I go, 4 to 5 years old is a little tricky, but I said, I really want to do this. We did good, gentle moisturizers, some cooling wraps and stuff. I do wet wraps at night, just with water and a gentle moisturizer. They actually didn't even want to use moisturizer. We actually just used like an oil. I think we used sunflower or coconut oil, and then cooling wet wraps. And again, within about 3 or 4 weeks, this guy was brand new, so much better. Now his eczema was still there, so we still had eczema, and we decided to do a totally non-steroidal approach. I kept him on phototherapy because that was keeping his eczema under control. We weaned him down to once weekly on phototherapy, and then just topical non-steroidals. And in him, actually, he's one of my patients who did respond very nicely to the crisaborole, the new non-steroidal ointment, which unfortunately stings and burns for a lot of people, but when it does work, it's pretty cool. And he can use that as needed now, along with light therapy, and is doing great steroid-free. And he does like moisturizer, so I got him to use some more conventional moisturizers, and that seems to help him as well.
Okay, I got two questions that are like burning in my mind. They're not burning like TSW does, but they are burning in my mind. So you're mentioning a few other things now. So we've got, our community wants to know, Eucrisa. There's so many things that are non-steroidal topicals. Is there also possibly a withdrawal process from those? Do we just not know yet? Are we being guinea pigs in the dermatological world of take out steroids, now start this? Or do you have confidence that that's something we could consider? Because I personally have not used a thing. I won't do anything anymore that's a prescription, because I'm so afraid that I'm going to get back into this process again.
I know, and a lot of my patients with TSW are, like I say, they've kind of, medicine has been tainted. It's been, you know, it's really, so I feel like the whole thing is corrupt, and I respect that, and I feel really bad about it. The truth is, I don't know, right? I honestly don't know. To some extent, we are all guinea pigs in life, right? I mean, even the wisest of us, people have been around the longest. The world is changing so fast. My teachers didn't understand why eczema was exploding, and now I'm seeing more. I've done, just thinking about the numbers and what I saw during residency, I see more eczema patients in a year. Now, admittedly, I'm a specialist in this area and I'm interested in it, but I see more eczema patients in a year than the best I can calculate my teachers saw in their entire career. I see so much. So I'm learning about it and thinking about it in a way, and the world has so many more patients with it, that we're learning new stuff all the time. So I think things we'd never seen before that were so rare, only once in a while you'd see it, now are becoming commonplace. So I honestly can say in good faith, I don't know. To the best of my knowledge, I think that, you know, using things that are non-steroidal and that are smoother on, smoother off, I feel like in general, the way the universe works, my philosophy of the world is that, sort of, easy come, easy go, right? So steroids are easy come, easy go. Boy, it works so fast. It's so good. It's so great. So it's a little bit of that deal with the devil. When you use crisaborole, name brand is Eucrisa. I don't want to, say that without, there's no bias there. But when you use that one, it is not that great. It's slow to work. It's much more modest effect than steroids. It doesn't, it often stings and burns probably in as much as a third of my patients. They say it's only 4%, but a lot of my patients get sting and burn. So I have everybody try a small area first. So it is much, much less glamorous, much less easy coming, easy go. When it does work, though, I'm really happy because a lot of patients say it really seems good. And I've not seen any kind of rebound effect with it, or with its big brother. So we know there's a psoriasis medicine that uses the same mechanism. It's the one called Otezla. Its drug name is apremilast. But that one is a pill, and it works pretty well for psoriasis, but I'd say very similar effect to the topical. Works maybe in about a third of my patients, just me speaking about my own experience, only about a third, but really safe. So we end up trying it a lot of people because when it works, they're really happy. When you stop them, it doesn't flare right back up. It's like just a much milder and gentler approach that I think 20 years ago might not have been people would have just dismissed it. So it's too wimpy. It doesn't do much. It's not as fast. Just keep using steroids. But I think in a modern era, we're looking for gentler. I think people are saying, you know what? I don't need to be quick fixed. Can we just be a little gentler? Can we try to shape things more carefully? Can we make a trade-off that I don't mind if it's not the most effective thing ever. I just want to be safe. And I think that's where these new drugs are coming in, and including, again, some things in the pipeline that I think are really exciting.
And I would say it's hard to know, as somebody who's withdrawn from steroids but still has some symptoms, if I choose to use Protopic or one of these other creams, it's like, how do you differentiate and know? And am I now withdrawing from that, or so when somebody comes to you that's going through TSW, let's say it's beyond 6 months and they still have these very severe symptoms like many, many, many of us do. Is there a protocol that you generally, or are there options that you start to say, one of the big hot buttons in our community is no moisture at all, to use complete moisture withdrawal as well, which I've personally done and seen great results, but then there's like times where you can't do it. It almost seems impossible. And there's times you force your way through it and you get great results. So can you tell us is there any method to that? Is there anything that you've seen where you say, why would skin respond to no moisture? Is there some science behind that you know of that would give us more belief that would be a route to consider?
Yeah, I have a few patients who really feel same as you do, so much better if they just let their skin kind of dry out. There are a few things. One thing is that when we put moisturizer on, we do bring more blood vessels to the skin. And if you are vasoactive already and your blood vessels are acting, a little bit erratically, then I think it could potentially just trigger that response, which can make things feel burning and uncomfortable and bring more inflammation to the skin. The second piece is some percentage of patients, and you'll hear this thrown in our face a lot. People say, well, it's not TSW, maybe you're allergic to something. Even though I think that people are often dismissive when they say it, there probably is some truth to that. So, a lot of moisturizers are packed with ingredients. They have all sorts of preservatives and other junk. So if you have become allergic to something, then it makes sense. That could potentially trigger that. So I'm careful because I think people will try to dismiss TSW as being an allergy, and I don't think that's fair. But I do think that it is not crazy to consider patch testing or consider allergic parts of this. And there's no doubt if you're allergic to some component of the moisturizer, that makes it worse. The last thing I think is there's a nerve aspect to this condition for many people, and certain sensations on the skin can just trigger the whole thing as well. And again, when you're putting a cream or an ointment on the skin, that might just drive those nerve endings crazy, which send a signal that's stimulatory to make it worse.
Okay. Are you familiar with Dr. Sato with the no moisture therapy?
No.
Okay.
No, I'm not. I haven't heard that.
Okay, that would definitely be something that we'd want to talk to you more about possibly, but the idea of really the treatment being no moisture therapy for everybody and getting great results, staying in a clinic and literally going through the process of not using any moisture whatsoever to treat the withdrawals.
It's interesting. Yeah. I mean, I'd say I'd keep an open mind to it. I worry a little bit because you guys are a warrior community and you guys are extremely tough and will put yourself, I would say, almost through anything, to get through this, that I worry a little bit about just the shape of kind of how do I want to put it? I want to be diplomatic. I'm an acupuncturist, you know this as well, and I'm very interested in alternative medicine. I'm fascinated by integrative approaches. But one of the things I don't like about some of my integrative brothers and sisters who practice is this shape, and I'm going to describe it to you. Tell me what you think. So particularly my patients with eczema, they will see a practitioner who will say, this is food related. This is all food, 100% food all the time, which I think is not true deeply. And I feel very confident saying that it is, you know, not a good thing to put out there in the world that everybody's food related. I wish it were. But that being said, that's what they'll say. And they'll say, you need to go on this diet. And here's this diet. It's very severe, very strict. Sometimes they'll do testing. Many times the testing they'll do will be very reflective of everything they're eating. So it's like, basically everything you're eating is bad. You need to switch into this very extreme diet. And the patient will try their best. And they'll come back and they'll say one of two things, because inevitably they're maybe a little bit better. Sometimes, you know, they were in a terrible space to begin with, so you can only go up from there. If you're at the rock bottom, you can only get a little better. Sometimes I think certain dietary changes can be very positive for people. If they're eating more healthy, that's great. It's hard to argue with that. Sometimes it's just that a huge dramatic change or a caloric drop will sort of shock your system. But I'm just giving potential reasons why they might be a little better. So they come back and they're a little better, but they're certainly not cured. So they say, what do you think? I'm trying my best. And that practitioner might say something along the lines of, did you cheat at all? Have you cheated even once? And they'll say, you know, once I guess I did have a little bit of soy sauce on, you know, in February, and I know soy sauce does have gluten. They'll say, that's it. You got to try harder. You're not doing enough. Or if they really feel confident they haven't, you know, I swear I haven't cheated. I've been perfect. They say, well, it's only been 3 months. This can take you years. You need to keep on this diet and I'll see you in 2024, you know? And so those patients come in often completely broken, sobbing in my office. And they say, well, it was my fault. You know, I didn't do it. I had that gluten once, or I had a bite of pizza, or I had a cookie at a party, or I just didn't wait long enough. We had only given it 18 months. And my heart breaks for those patients, because while it is possible, right? Like scientifically, I guess it is possible that if you were 100% on whatever crazy diet they've invented for you, maybe after some amount of time, maybe it's 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, I don't know. Maybe it's true. Obviously I can't argue against that. But at the same time, I feel like if the treatment is worse than the disease, and you are so miserable on this and feeling bad about it and guilty about it, that's not good. That's not a useful way to get through life. My job as a doctor is to try to help you, right? We're trying to help the dis-ease, get the dis out of the ease and make you feel better. And I can't always do that. But if I can do that, I want to. And I don't want to guilt you into feeling bad about your disease. I mean, obviously, if you're smoking and shooting up drugs, it's like, please stop this. You are hurting yourself. Okay. Or if you know you have a food allergy and you keep eating that food and it's making you flare up and high, I mean, golly, that's bad. But that notwithstanding, that kind of extreme stuff notwithstanding, I feel like it can be a guilting technique. Anyways, I don't know if that's the case, but sometimes I feel like my patients, like, they just told me to stay longer. Don't put moisturizer on longer. It's going to get better. And I just want to be aware of that shape of a potential therapy of just wait longer, stay with it. I don't know if that's the case. And obviously, if someone told me, hey, man, we've done this with a number of patients, and if we stop all moisturization, they get better, then I'm on board. I'm totally on board. I mean, I think moisturizers are there to make the skin feel better and help the barrier. But if they're making it worse, by all means, let's stop it. And maybe we can do something internal. Maybe there will be a supplement. We can talk about that in a second, too. But maybe there's some other way to kind of help strengthen the skin. But that's really all I want from my moisturizer. So if a patient feels better, and I have a few patients say, I don't want moisturizer. Great, no problem. I mean, I want you to feel better. So do a test. You know, let's try one. Maybe we'll try one that has no preservatives. Let's try a couple different ones. If these make you feel better, let's use them. If they don't, let's not. But I also don't know if that's the mythical secret to the whole story. Again, I hope it is. I would love it. Then we're going to, if that is, I'm on board. I'm signing my name first. I'm going to say no moisturizer therapy is going to be the secret. But I'm just a little bit skeptical until we know a little bit more about it, you know?
Mm-hmm. And there are, one of the viewers says there, you know, there are research articles about it, but also it's no moisture therapy actually is fluid restriction as well. So not drinking as much water and fluids, exercising, early bedtimes, different lifestyle behaviors as well. But something we could definitely look into. I think, you know, again, if any of us had found the magic bullet, like you're saying, we would all be endorsing it and would love to see 100% efficacy for that treatment. So it still seems to be such a mixed bag. But one of the what I want to know is it seems like when we go through this withdrawal, it's not just our skin that's involved. We don't understand what's going on the skin because of all the things that happen that have never presented during regular eczema or our our first diagnosis. So we get the oozing, we get the flaring, the burning, the itching, the pain, the zingers, the inability to sleep, the insomnia. We get all of these things. But is there in just in topical steroids, the warnings or the possible side effects, that come up at the bottom of the screen that say you could blah, 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 have these things. It doesn't seem like we get those types of responses just from using steroids. It seems like it comes afterwards or with this withdrawal process. What is listed for a topical steroid as far as what body parts are affected by putting topical steroids onto the surface of our skin? Because it seems like when we withdraw, we go through, it's your thyroid, that's a problem. It's your adrenal gland is exhausted. It's like the doctors seem like they're chasing, maybe it's this, maybe it's that, maybe it's this. Is that the result of steroid use? Or do you feel like once we go through the withdrawal, our body just goes into this hyper crisis that now everything's being impacted?
I think it's a great question. I don't know, to be honest, but it certainly can be from steroid use. If you use enough, and some of my patients who have TSW have used, the amount would kill a horse. They've just used a very high potency steroid over a huge amount of body surface area for a very long time. When you do that, you absorb it. So you are basically getting systemic corticosteroids, and that can damage all those organs. It can do just terrible stuff. When you hear me talk about how to treat eczema, many people will say, well, what about oral steroids? I use them all the time. And I'm like, oh my God, please do not use oral steroids. Like that's a surefire way to cause trouble with this, but many people do. And again, even some of my teachers would say, I've been practicing for 40 years, I've done it all the time. I never have any problems. So there is something to be said that some people don't experience. So that, I guess maybe that's a nice way to put it. The most diplomatic way to put it is some people seem to be able to fight TSW and they don't get it. No matter what you do to them, you can keep poisoning them with it and they're fine. But other people will respond at tiny doses. So I think that there could be at least, two possibilities, that the steroids themselves have damaged these organs. And then when you pull it off, it's bad. But I also think there may be a group of people where it's like, golly, you haven't absorbed enough or used enough to really cause the direct damage. So there must be the steroids flip the switch. They've screwed something up and now we're getting the secondary problem. And it really seems like a lot of the patients I've seen who are pretty sick haven't had enough to be sort of the conventional thought that the steroids damage them, that it's enough that it's just triggered something different inside of them.
Yeah, I would, personally, I felt like I chased appointments, one specialist to the next, trying to figure out why, as a 20-something, 30-something-year-old person, I was allergic to everything. I was, hypersensitive to everything. I was going through so many, thyroid conditions. It was like I was always chasing, why is this all happening? Why am I such a sick person? And it was literally when I found ITSAN that I was like, bingo. That's what I have. That's it. And here I've gone to every specialist in town to figure this out. And not one ever said, what are you taking? How much do you use? How much, it never seemed to come back to, oh, the steroids. It was always dismissed. Oh, steroids wouldn't do any of this to you. So I just wondered about what do you consider those side effects to be? A couple of people are writing in and they're in a place of, they're scared right now, this nightmare of TSW. They're in the really hard part right now. What are your preferred options if a patient comes to you? Is there something you recommend for itch, for the unbearable itch, the ooze, the burning skin? Is there anything you can offer that we can't say it's the regimen everybody would take or put you in that spot, but is there something that offers comfort that that you've seen over time that really seems to help with these things?
Definitely. And I agree. I think I don't have a simple algorithm. I really try to listen to each patient, and I really try to also figure out how severe they are, because I think sometimes it's much, much more severe and sometimes less severe, and we can do different things. But I'll tell you some of the things in my tool bag. My favorite treatment, as I've mentioned a few times tonight, is phototherapy. I think the healing power of light is just one of those amazing things. It works differently than everything else we use. Most dermatology offices do have it. It's usually covered by insurance, and it's doing so many things. It's cooling the itch directly. It's calming the inflammation. I think it's strengthening the skin because it helps boost antimicrobial peptide in the skin, among other things. So light therapy is one of my favorite things to do. It's not for everybody. If you're really sick, sometimes it's just not. You can't go in a unit if your skin's super, super bad. But that is one of my favorites. Number two, I really think physical cooling is really important and can help. So, for example, there are companies that make the mineral water sprays. So I think Avion, the water company, makes one. Aven makes one. I even think La Roche-Posay, they have their spring water, those mineral waters. They're super nice. They're ultra gentle to cool your skin down with that, can help with that flush blush heat and burning feeling for some patients. I think that's a really gentle, nice thing to do. And you can do that throughout the day. Kind of piggybacking on that is doing wet wraps. And again, obviously not with steroids, but you doesn't even need to use any medicine. And potentially you could even do it without a moisturizer if you wanted, just cooling damp garments at night to your body, and then stay nice and warm. Put like a nice sweatshirt or a sweater over that so you stay warm. Keep the room toasty warm. I don't want you getting chills and getting cold, because already your skin, all in the blood, all in the skin, you have a real risk of catching a chill because you're shunting all that blood. Your body, you feel hot, but your body heat's being emanated out. So keeping warm, but that cools the skin directly. Zinc oxide. So I like zinc so much, and that can come in the form of a diaper paste. You can get Desitin over the counter, or Triple Paste is a really good diaper paste brand. It comes in a big tub. That's super soothing and gentle. The zinc has a wound healing effect and anti-inflammatory effect. Some of my patients like that. Right along with that is calamine lotion, an old-fashioned remedy. It's so soothing. It's so cooling on the skin. It's a little messy because it's pink, but again, we don't want Caladryl. Caladryl has Benadryl in there, which some people get allergic to. So I wouldn't do that one regularly. I would just do plain old-fashioned, the oldest-fashioned calamine lotion, which doesn't have any drug in there. It's just it's the iron product in there. Very soothing and cooling. So those are some of the natural things we'll do. And then as we go into the more powerful things, if somebody's really suffering, cyclosporin, I will use that medicine as a powerful oral medicine. It has a gigantic list of potential side effects, gigantic. We have to spend a visit talking about it. I have a handout about it, but we use it for a relatively short period. Usually my goal is just a couple of months total. The first month at full dose. If they're doing better, and most people really are, we drop down to half dose. And then for some of my patients, I'll have them just do weekend dosing. They just take it on Saturday and Sunday. And then we try to come off completely. The goal is always completely medicine-free, but varying times. And the first goal, of course, is not being miserable and not being able to get up in the morning kind of thing. If you're not able to go to work, we want to try to fix that. Other things we'll do, the dupilumab. I wrote up a paper last year, I think I sent it to the group, where we had a number of patients with TSW that we put on dupilumab, the injectable biologic, and they did really well as a group. Obviously not perfect, but definitely all my patients saw some improvement, which was really nice. And some patients did incredibly well. What I like about that is it's super targeted. It is not an immunosuppressant. It is not a cortisone of any sort, way, shape, or form. It works by blocking the inflammation very cleanly, and it does not have a rebound effect, which is great. We wrote up a paper as well last year looking at patients who stopped it. And of my group of patients who stopped it for varying reasons, 2 women were going to get pregnant, so they said, we just want to stop as we're going to start trying to have a baby. One guy actually had eye irritation from it, so we had to stop him because his eyes were getting bothered. One person was going to travel overseas, so varying reasons, but all had done very well. When they stopped, I followed them out for many, many weeks after. And not only did not a single patient rebound, and I define rebound as being worse than where they started, right? So that's true with prednisone. For a lot of people, I can get you clear with prednisone, but then when you stop, not only do you get back to where you often are worse. So with dupilumab, not only did nobody rebound, nobody even got back to baseline. So it really had I call it a partial remission or a remittive effect. It kind of kept people better over time. And again, that's the signature that I'm looking for with eczema treatment. I want things to be helping and getting things into what I call the virtuous cycle. It's a disease of vicious cycles, right? Your skin barrier is damaged, your immune system's going nuts. When that happens, you're feeling itch, so you're rubbing and scratching, which is further damaging your barrier. More crap is getting in, allergens, irritants, pathogens like staph and viruses, and fungus too. Now we're learning more about malassezia, this yeast on the skin. All that's driving in, your immune system's going more nuts. Then it's affecting your behavior. Your sleep starts falling apart. We know that when your sleeping is screwed up, your skin barrier is further damaged. Anyway, so you're in this terrible vicious cycle falling down. If we can break that cycle and get you in a virtuous cycle where you're feeling better, your skin microbiome's getting normal, your nerve endings are shrinking, getting back to normal size, your sleep is improved, which is helping everything balance, your barrier is healing, everything's better, then it makes sense. It follows. If we've done a good job and robustly improved you, when I stop the medicines, not only are you not going to flare right back up again, you're hopefully going to stay relatively better going forward. And maybe even, and this happens, and I never promised this, but this is my goal. I have a number of patients every month where we kind of celebrate, where they come in and say, I'm like, how have you been? I haven't seen you in a year. What's been happening? You're like, I'm good. I haven't used any medicines all year. I'm like, what? You graduate. Bye. And I don't give them a refill. They haven't had refills. They're truly done. Their eczema is burned out. Now, does that mean they'll never have a flare up again? Probably not. They're probably still sensitive. What got them in there in the first place is probably some predisposition to having it, but they are functionally cleared and in a deep remission. And that's our goal. So if we can get people there, I believe we can get people with TSW there as well. We just have to find the right sequence of events and the right treatments for that individual patient.
In your, and I think a big part of that is trusting the dermatologist that you're going to, that they, one, believe in and understand what you have, so that you can trust the treatment. Because I think that's a big struggle for the community, as you go in and they say, well, if you don't want steroids, here, try this instead. And you don't know, you don't have any faith in whether or not that's going to have the same response, if you're going to withdraw from that as well. But in the patients that you said heal within 3 to 6 months, those patients, do you still see all of the telltale signs, that the pretty common ones of TSW, like the sleeves, the pain, the itch, the zingers, the nightless, the sleepless nights, the hair loss, the weight loss, do you see all of that in 6 months, or?
No, usually it's an abbreviated course for those patients, and they won't have so much, they will not be as severe or as well defined as those patients. Usually those kind of findings, and again, there are people who've seen way more TSW patients than me. I've probably seen on the order of 30 or 40, maybe a little higher. But that's, it's a relatively modest group. It puts me in a higher group than most regular dermatologists, but definitely I know people that are focusing on it are seeing way more. And your community, of course, you guys are communicating a lot more. So forgive me if I'm, I'm just telling you my experience on what I've seen, which is a cross section. But for the patients that really have the full blown looking disease, in my experience, those have been people that have been suffering on the order of years. Those are the patients who've really been going on many, many months or even years. They seem to be more of a chronic type change that happens over time, not those acute or, more acute patients. But that, again, it could be a limit of my experience.
Okay. So the idea that if we're going beyond 6 months, can you state again if we're going beyond 6 months, you would look at that patient and say, this is not just TSW?
Right, that this may be something bigger than just TSW. This may be a more chronic sort of steroid. I think a way to think about it is a steroid-induced state, a steroid-induced dermatosis, where the steroids have now broken, presumably the immune system and possibly the blood vessels, that neurovascular connection that is broken in a deeper way, that is not going to just come back over time. Now, it may, but in my experience, these are folks that are saying, we're going on many, many months or many years. And at that point, it's like, there is the potential for spontaneous remission for other reasons of anything. People with lichen planus, totally unrelated disease, they go into remission sometimes after years. It just gets better. But I don't think that's how do I say it? I don't think that's a reasonable approach to the disease. Say, hey, just hang out. Some people get better. It's like, that's not how we were trained. That's not the right approach to it. I sure hope you get better. I'm going to try to do everything I can to make you comfortable and help heal you as best we can with our very crude, crummy tools. But as best we can until that point hopefully happens, we hope and pray, right? But it would be weird to look at a patient with lichen planus, a really uncomfortable inflammatory condition, and be like, hey, some of my patients get better. Just wait it out. Like, you could. Certain healthcare systems might say that. They might say, we don't have anything for you, so good luck. But I don't think that's cool. At least I think we have to try to offer some stuff, or say, why don't we try something, or can we consider something? But if the patient says they just want to wait, then that's what I'll tell them. I'll say, I sure hope it gets better for you. I just don't know. I don't know if it could be months or years, or, if you told somebody who, especially little kids are worried about, you have like a 7-year-old and they've been using topical steroids since birth, but if they're waiting now, if they're waiting, if it's going to take 7 years, or 14 years or 20, it's like, wait a minute, like your entire childhood has now been destroyed waiting. I don't think that's acceptable. That may be all we have, but I think that we can't settle for that, for crying out loud. We're going to have to say, let's do something, or we have to put some research in so we can do something than just wait it out. That's not cool.
Yeah, that's hard, especially, I went through it as an adult, but as our, we have so many moms and dads here, caregivers that are taking care of little kids, and it's just that fear of when do I know to administer something else to my child. But yeah, I think what you're hitting on too is the quality of life in this journey and healing process. So many of us have lost careers and relationships and, mental endurance, so many things throughout this journey, that quality of life definitely becomes a huge a huge consideration. I've got a couple questions here. One of the questions is, doesn't phototherapy bring blood vessels to the skin?
Not really. I mean, if it's warm, like light can definitely make you flush and blush if it's warm. But the cool thing about a phototherapy booth is that it's generally the light without the heat. So in my understanding, it really doesn't. It doesn't bring blood vessels to the skin, and if anything, yeah, it doesn't have any effect directly on the blood vessel system except for being anti-inflammatory.
Okay. Another question is there any merit or any experience you have or belief in the idea of tapering steroids or topical steroids tapering down for an amount of time, or even replacing topical steroids with oral steroids to taper?
Yeah, I mean, tapering in general is a very smart idea. And whenever we use steroids, if we're stuck, especially with oral steroids, you should always taper, because I think that gives your body a way to sort of rebuild its ability, kind of restart its systems. If you stop somebody cold turkey, the poor body is like, okay, I stopped making my natural cortisol. I kind of changed things for this, because it's a molecule similar to the one we make. It's similar to our own cortisol. So in a weird way, it's like if you gave somebody a bunch of thyroid hormone, their thyroid would kind of quiet down, right? You could do this. You can induce this, not willingly, but accidentally. People have done things where they're taking essentially thyroid hormone, and then if you stop abruptly, your poor thyroid's like, wait, I'm not ready. I can't keep up with this demand. So similarly with steroids, if you have to use them, yes, it is so much better to taper them. I don't know if maybe you mean it in terms of like restarting somebody on steroids and trying a taper for TSW. I think it's a plausible thing to try. I personally don't want any steroids in these patients though, because I'm so afraid of this other piece where I feel like it's already broken them. And I'm just so afraid that we're going to break them more. I think their body has reacted in a very specific way to tell us that this is the wrong treatment for them. So I prefer to not use it. But I know in some of the literature, when I just wrote this review paper, some people have said, why don't you just try starting at a high dose and just going slow? But I think it's dangerous. It may work in some cases, but I think it's probably not advised.
Okay. If someone was to look into another question here with phototherapy, what would you say the general healing response time frame is?
It's super slow. I mean, it's going to take a few months, because the first month is sort of slowly ramping up. And I find my patients with TSW are often really sun sensitive. I think when your skin's just so hot, you have to go ultra slow. So we use a vitiligo protocol, like the people that have no pigment in their skin, just like vitiligo, very slow and steady. So the first month, they're kind of ramping up. It's really the second and third month. But that being said, I want to be very clear, because you know how I am about these limits. I would never tell somebody, oh, keep going, it could be 5, 6 years. No. If we're not seeing any improvement by the month 3, if there's nothing, we're done. It's not going to work. Or if they're just continually burning and it's bad for them, we're done. That being said, when it does work, it's pretty cool. Usually by month 2 or 3, we'll start seeing some improvement. If they're going the right direction, usually 6-month course would be about right. The first few months we build up, month 3 to 5, they're doing better. Then I might taper down, and then they're good. And a lot of times it just works out that a lot of people, particularly with eczema, will present more in the fall and winter. So they kind of do the light therapy through the winter, and then summer's here. And I'll say, okay, great. Why don't you take the summer off? You can get a little bit of cautious sun exposure that can help you get through the summer, which tends to be better for people with the more humid air and less, brutal stuff. And it's really nice. They can usually kind of transition to that naturally, which works well.
All right, we're getting close to our time limit. I think because we could talk to you all night, Dr. Lio. Having your attention is like just such a gift to us. Give us some advice, if you will, please. So many of us have stories of going to dermatologist after dermatologist who, and so I can't even say it gracefully, who literally just say, this is not a thing. It's not a thing. You're refusing your treatment. You need to keep using your treatment. I went to 7 dermatologists with my husband along, right next to me, because it was such a mystery. And 7 doctors said, she's refusing her treatment. So how do we approach dermatologists with this? What's their response to that? What would you suggest we do?
It is super hard. And we live in this really strange time where we have a lot of extreme opinions on things, and it does make it tricky. I think the best thing is to try to present it in a more moderate way as best you can. I will tell you that I think you catch more flies with honey than with vinegar, right? So maybe coming in and saying, I know that not everybody agrees with this diagnosis, but I'm really worried about this. I'm kind of thinking this is what I have. So would you be comfortable using a non-steroidal approach, and then maybe bringing a few of the papers, you know, and I'm happy to send you my papers. I think those are not a bad place to start, and say, you know, do you mind if we kind of follow this approach and sort of try to avoid this? And hopefully if I get this new paper out, it'll be really cool. And we can bring that one to you. But I think if you're really gentle about it, and I think you have to be like you, unfortunately, to some extent, you have to shop a little bit. And if the person says, nope, I don't do it that way, then you say, thank you for your time, and you move on. Because there's no doubt, you know, I get to talk to a lot of my colleagues, and there are many amazing dermatologists who are so smart, many times smarter than me, and so good with patients. But then there are some that are not the best with patients and are just difficult. Just like any people anywhere else, you know, doctors are people too. So you have the whole range. So you want to find someone that you really like and trust. And even if you can't convince them, our goal, again, we don't need to convince anybody necessarily. We're going to do that in the long game. But in that visit, you don't have to convince them. You don't have to totally convert them. You just have to get them to be therapeutically aligned with you. You have to say, I know you might not believe it. I know some dermatologists think it's a bunch of baloney, but my wishes are not to use any steroids. Can you help me go this route? And I think a good dermatologist would say, totally. I mean, that's where I started. I really was like, really, this is a thing? Like, I didn't really understand it or really know what to make of it, but I'm like, I'm going to listen to my patient. If this is how you want to do it, let's do it. Let's try to avoid it. I'm not going to push you to take a steroid. And that was sort of the bridge that got me there. And now I'm in a very different place. You know, I really feel that this is something we all need to learn about. And now I'm fighting an uphill battle of trying to get that word out.
Well, thank you. Thank you for fighting with us. So just to kind of recap before we close, somebody who comes into your office who you believe is suffering from TSW, after 3 to 6 months, phototherapy is your preferred choice? Or would you even say there's a type of regimen that you would say is pretty standard as far as what you're...
I'd say maybe I'd keep it more just like options. And I think it might be nice to sort of present them, you know, to talk to your dermatologist about the options. So I think maybe saying, you know, things are pretty bad and it's been 3 to 6 months and you're, you know, obviously steroid free, and we're going to stay steroid free, of course. But saying, you know, first of all, if it's pretty bad, then I think we want to think, yeah, phototherapy or cyclosporin or dupilumab. One of those 3 would be the things I'd bring up with them and say, you know, I really, really think I need to sustain if you're, you know, covered in it and pretty miserable. Topically, I think if you haven't already, thinking about Protopic, but I will say Protopic, you know, as what you were saying before, I'm a little more skeptical of Protopic. I actually think Protopic maybe could fuel it or cause its own version of it. So when a patient says, I'm worried about Protopic too, I'm like, okay, kind of me too. Because it is still an immunosuppressant in its own right. Now, it's closer to cyclosporin. And I don't think cyclosporin triggers this, as far as I can tell. But I guess I wouldn't be super surprised if somebody told me, and I haven't seen this yet, although I've had patients tell me Protopic seemed to make it worse. I've had no one say cyclosporin has, but I think that's also a very small number of people that are benign comparatively. But if someone told me cyclosporin fueled it, I wouldn't be totally shocked. I'd be like, yeah, crap. But I don't think it's everybody, because I've had a few patients use cyclosporin and come off very successfully. So again, it may be groups within groups within groups. And which is it's a deep philosophical question. It's like, if you know something can hurt somebody, what do you do about it? I mean, like, I always, you know, putting it in perspective, it's like, gosh, you know, cars kill more children than like anything. Kids die in car accidents, right? It's terrible. But like, we don't ban cars or ban children in cars. We're kind of like, well, it's just one of the risks. And I feel like that's a little bit where the world is going to probably end up with topical steroids, as much as we want to use other things. It'll probably end up somewhere in the lines of, look, there's a group of people that really don't do well with topical steroids. And we need better ways to figure out those people and find that pattern. But for the vast majority of people, I mean, and it's amazing how many people abuse them and don't get this, right? Really honestly abuse the steroids and don't get it. So for a lot of people, they probably don't have to worry about it. And because of that, you're going to have people who don't believe in it. You know, they're going to say, it didn't bother me. And I think that's why we have to be a little bit diplomatic about how we present it and say, you know, I know not everybody gets this or not everyone sees this or it may be kind of rare, but for me, this is bad. And I think one day we're going to be able to look in what I call precision medicine. We're going to be able to look and say, the reason is because of this factor, this growth factor, blood vessel, something about your T cells. You know, we're going to go say, you don't do well with it. And then we may find a subgroup, and you don't do well with Protopic either. And you don't do well with cyclosporin either. So there may be that group. And boy, you're the moisturizer group that you should never use moisturizer because that just screws everything up. But until we get there, I don't think it's crazy to try stuff, especially if you have someone who's going to work with you. So, you know, I mean, if Protopic made things worse, I would feel terrible. But I would stay, obviously I'm gonna stay with you. We're not going to do that. We'll go something different. But if it made it better, boy, that would sure be better than having to do cyclosporin, which has its own set of risks. So, you know, there is something to be said for a step therapy even in that. So Protopic would be a thought, which of course now is generic, which is nice, the tacrolimus. And the crisaborole would be another thing, of course. That's our other non-steroidal that we could try. It's very expensive. It can sting and burn. So we want to test it. It's not very powerful, but that would be something. So that's our bag of tricks. Light therapy, cyclosporin, topical calcineurin inhibitor. So that's Protopic and Elidel. They're generics. And then crisaborole, AKA Eucrisa. Those are the four big things, plus the physical things we talked about, cooling the skin down, using like mineral water sprays, plus or minus different moisturizers versus essential oils. Oh, and one other thing I wanted to say that I think is worth thinking about. Again, I don't have great data on this. I've tried it with a few people. It's one of those hit or miss kind of things. But hemp oil, so, you know, cannabinoids, so CBD and hemp oil, the one that's easy to get, very inexpensive, and is not regulated in any way is just hemp seed oil. Amazon has it for just, you know, like $10 as an oil. There was a really nice study a few years ago that showed it helped with inflammation and pain and itch and atopic derm. I have some of my patients trying this now. And I think there's something to be said. I think that can have an effect. And there's many ways. You could, you know, everything from medical marijuana to this Amazon over-the-counter oil that you take a couple teaspoons by mouth each day or put it in your smoothie. Another supplement that's really interesting is called L-histidine. L-histidine is an amino acid supplement. Again, you can get it at a nutrition store, or Amazon has it. Very inexpensive, very safe. It's water-soluble protein stuff. And again, you put a couple of scoops in your smoothie each day. That seems to boost the skin's barrier. It seems to help increase filaggrin production, which is a protein that helps the skin get strong. There's another thought that maybe we could help, again, the underlying issues and help get things back to normal. So those are a couple of the supplements I'm really interested in for my TSW patients. There's many others to consider, things that are more addressing redness and so on, but I think those are some other things. So I think if you present that to your dermatologist, I think you're going to have luck. And if it's not that person, say, thank you, it's been a pleasure, and find someone else who is willing to work with you.
Yeah. One other thing that you didn't mention that so many of us say works is salt water. If you could just prescribe a trip to the ocean for all of us, you would probably be a very, very busy doctor. We will all come to you. So for some,
you have to take me with you. We have to go together to sit out by the ocean, right? Yeah.
A good saltwater environment seems to be very healing. So many people say that. That is very healing. So, and I found that personally too, just the ocean being in a nice, cool, humid environment. I could see drastic changes in my skin, which you've got me thinking so much about the blood vessels and the dilation, because it's still just this little bit of pink tone that I've got, but it's like my face and the rest of the body is completely clear. It's just the most bizarre thing. So it's got to be some kind of blood vessel thing going on. But we got to let you get home for sure. And I just want to again say thank you for daring to come on ITSAN's site with us and have this conversation with us. Thank you for embracing the conversation with your colleagues. I know that you've got a voice in the dermatology community, and every second that you speak TSW into their minds, you are honoring every single one of us who is trying so hard to get our lives back and to heal from this mysterious condition. So thank you, Dr. Lio. I hope you feel like you have been a gift tonight and we have honored you, because you have done, I mean, being here is just, as rare as our condition is, that's how rare it is for us to have the treat of a dermatologist who's actually listening when we come in. And we have these questions. People are suffering all over with this condition, and it's worldwide. So I thank you so much. I know there's so many more conversations and topics I wanted to cover just on the regulation of steroids, but for tonight, I feel like you've given us such a gift, something that we can hold on to and move forward with. So thank you. Please keep sharing this message with your colleagues. Please encourage them to go to itsan.org as well and just see who we are. We've got faces, you know, we're not hiding out. We're trying to be very visible, and it's hard to ignore the condition and what it looks like. That's for sure. When you see it, you can't look away and ignore it. So thank you, Dr. Lio. I know our entire community has said, I have just tons of messages in the chat here. Everybody saying thank you, thank you, thank you. I would like to know, are we able to post could you share your contact information with me or Kelly so that we can get, can people contact you? Are you okay with that?
Yes, maybe what we could do, if they could kind of go through you, that'd be great. We could sort of batch it a little bit. That'd be fantastic. We can kind of collect common questions, and then maybe I can do like Q&As we can put on the website just to keep it a little bit more general. That'd be great, and I would love to come back again. Anytime you want to have me, I'd love to come back.
Well, thank you very much. And before we leave, I just like to say, I know that the screen says that I'm Kelly, but I'm not Kelly. Our president, Kelly, is working alongside Dr. Lio. So you have to have faith in our community that our president, who is representing all of us, is connected to all of these other brave medical warriors who are not afraid to stand up and say, hey, this is a thing. It's not just eczema, this is something. And so she is a very fierce warrior out there with us who's embracing this. I know her and Dr. Lio are going to be presenting in the near future together. So just know that we have our advocates out doing the hard work. And if you're suffering tonight at all, please stay connected to ITSAN and know that we are going to rally on behalf of this condition, and we're not going to stop. And people like Dr. Lio are going to continue to work alongside us because we are all curious. And if the best we can do right now is to remain curious, to remain open-minded, and to pull every idea out of the box and say, why not? Let's try. If it's not going to add more hurt, then we need to get all of that information together. So thank you to our viewers for being gracious tonight, for recognizing and respecting the fact that Dr. Lio really is putting himself out here on our behalf. And thank you for joining us. If you're home tonight and you're having a hard time, please use some of these resources. Stay connected. We have online meetups. We have meetups coming for kids, and we will have more webinars. And this will be, somebody just asked, will this be posted on our website? And yes, it will. As soon as the recording is uploaded, we will have it on our Facebook page and also on our website. So you can go there to find, to listen to it again and take more notes. So Dr. Lio, thank you so much. Thank you so much. I hope, and I know that we will, I have faith that we will see you again in this community. So thank you so much for being here with us tonight. And to everybody out there, we're praying for you, and we are sending you every healing wish that we can. We will see you all at our next event, and we'll see you online daily. Everybody take care. Have a great night.
Good night.
Good night.